So I am Nero. I am Director of Content Marketing at BuzzStream, for those of you who don't know me. And today I could be talking about writing the perfect pitch. I have basically talked to a lot of our great users and kind of collected a lot of like best practices. And I tried my best to kind of also support it with some data. So you're going to see a lot of data up front, and then I'm going to kind of break down the pieces. And I'm showcasing like bits and pieces of people who have given me access and allowed me to showcase, bits and pieces of their pitches. And then there's a handful of questions that people had asked ahead of time, which we'll hit at the end. And then we also have a lot of questions typically from the chat. So this will be a good one. So let's jump right in. All right. First thing up front, I guess this is from our State of Digital PR report. Most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today is going to be data-led content. It's mainly because this is the most used type of digital PR that people are doing. I'll touch on some extra commentary and press releases because it all kind of fits in. And the same with the hero content. I think a lot of that is data-driven anyway. I mean, you could take a lot of the same stuff. That's a lot of the same takeaways. Social media posting, I won't get into, obviously. It's not really pitching, but the other things I'm not covering are product releases and events and put those in the traditional PR bucket. All right, so let's dig into some of the data. Let's start here. Word length, and we're talking just the email body, right? 100 to 300 words get the best open rates, and you see this little bump here at the 600 to 1000, and that is, I think, because a lot of people do paste in their press releases within the pitch, and I'm going to get to that. But when you're talking about reply rate, it's still the under 300 words seems to earn the best replies. Again, there's a little bump at the end here, but there's clearly a much higher reply rate. Obviously, the replies and opens are up. Oops, sorry, let me make sure I mute everybody. That's my bad. All right, thanks, guys. So obviously, reply rates are not the end all be all. Open rates are not the end all be all. Really, we want the coverage rates, but this stuff I think is more indicative of just how people are going to interact with the data that they're given and the pitches that they're given. Okay. I want to touch on this because this is a really interesting finding when I was really digging into the data that we have and the types of agencies that do this. So when I asked about this, when you're pitching to journalists, do you actually paste the press release into the email body? Our State of Digital PR survey found basically a 50-50 split. Some people just do an email pitch and about half paste a press release within the body of the email. And I think that's going to skew a lot of those numbers that you saw before. But when I dug into it, it seems that the UK respondents that said that they did this, they were the ones that are primarily doing the pitching with the press release in the body, versus the US based ones are the ones that are just doing the plain straight up text. So that's really interesting to me because again, that's going to skew a lot of, I think, what we see here. So let's dig in some more. Okay. The email personalization thing. When we asked about this term personalization has a lot of different connotations. So realistically, most people, when they say that they personalize an email, they're just making sure that it's relevant to their beat or industry. And then they got, the 83% are saying they reference the journalist by name. Obviously, the referencing articles they've written, I think that is where this personalization thing gets a little dicey. And some people are averse to it because that is where I think some of the potential fake flattery comes in. Now, I've talked to a lot of journalists about this, and realistically, it's a kind of a toss up. Some people have said to me, oh yeah, I love when people call out a piece and tell me that they like it. But I've also talked to other people who are I don't have time for this. And, or it feels fake or feels, did you really read this? It's not needed, that sort of thing. So I think if it adds to it, you really can get something out of it, and it can actually help you build relationships. People have said, I recall getting feedback from journalists saying stuff like, thanks for the personalized pitch. It's it does mean something to them. But I think if you're just going about it saying like, hey, I saw you wrote our insert article name, this is a great piece or something, you're not really giving them anything to work with. I don't know if it's actually going to do anything. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but I want to talk a little bit about images because I have some data on that as well. So inline images, I thought that was an interesting one. This question comes up a lot. It's about a 70-30 split of people using them. And, realistically, the open rates based off of like not using it versus using it, pretty similar as you can see here. Same with like the number of images, same with reply rate. So there's like a little boost at the end here. Honestly, I didn't know really what to take from this. Like if you have a lot of images and they're helpful, like, I think of maybe city index studies, that sort of thing. Or like some people send like kind of multiple graphics, infographics kind of thing broken up. That can sometimes do it and just like solicit some more replies. Realistically, I don't know if this is the takeaway here. I'm not really sure where to go with this. I think it really depends on your image and if it is essential to the pitch. If it's really, it looks really nice and adds to it. You'll see when I get to the end here, I think my takeaway for all this stuff is it's really going to come down to the person you're pitching and how they like to utilize the things that you're pitched and how they like to write. Sometimes people actually take your images and add them right into their studies and into their articles, but a lot of times journalists don't like to do that. And the publications you're pitching to, they redo the graphics anyway, the graphs and that sort of thing. So I really do think it is different depending on who you're reaching out to, which again, I'll get to. Lastly, this was kind of surprising to me, but maybe I guess this has kind of fallen off, but like nobody ever seemingly uses attachments anymore. I think it's, it's a spam filter thing. So keep that in mind. Okay. Any questions here? Why don't I stop quickly? Do people have any questions about that data? I know it was like a ton of stuff. I'm going to elaborate on some of it. I'm just checking out the chat to see if anybody has any questions. All right. I'll keep an eye. I have the chat open. So if people have questions about this stuff, what goes into every pitch? So unfortunately, like I said, I don't think there is a pitch format that is going to work. If you're hoping to get that, take that away from this webinar, I'm sad to say I don't think this is going to be what you want. But what I'm hoping to kind of give you is a lot of different ways to think about this stuff based off of what a lot of the high performing agencies do. So like I said, there are key components here. So let's get into them. The first part of any pitch is going to be the hook. And your job is to hook and reel them in. You might have heard the AIDA method, AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. I think that's what it stands for. But I'm calling it, you want to hook them, right? So this is get their attention. So there's different ways to do this. I think a lot of people do this method where you're giving them a relevant stat, something that's really going to tie into things. Remember, your job as a PR professional here is to give the journalist something that their readers are going to want. So I think the timely angle is going to be very important. So if you can lean on trending topics, this is really important. So starting with a relevant stat, calling out a trend that's happening right now. It's millions of drivers rely on caffeine today to stay alert behind the wheel. Here's another one. Apple cider vinegar for weight loss is up 277% this week. There's a trend. Now, I like this idea also of creating curiosity. You can ask a question. So this idea of like, here's the stat. What does this really mean? Here's the stat, create that little curiosity gap, that knowledge gap that's making the person want to read on. I like this from Go Fish, this piece on the least in most studious states, the little playful curiosity. That's an A+ for Maine. Obviously like A+, it's an education-based studious states, little wordplay. But like starting out with something like that gets the journalists like, oh, what does that mean? Again, here's another one from Fractal, a stat plus the curiosity piece. Gamers are hitting the brakes on upgrades. Like that's the stat, that's the trend that's happening. But could cloud gaming make a graphics card obsolete? Again, this is like very niche, but for the right person, this is going to pique their curiosity. If you want to simplify this, I think the easiest way I've heard a lot of people talk about this, especially the journalists I've talked to, is this idea of like, why should I care? Why should I care that you're pitching me? And if you can answer that, I think you're going to be okay with that opening line. I mentioned this a little bit, but the why now is also something that's important. So why should I care? Why now? They're kind of two pieces of the same pie, but here, the propeller net example, the trend was as millions of drivers rely on caffeine to stay alert this winter, right? So it gives you a timeliness piece. And it's a why now for the journalist. Again, you want to give them the reason that they should be covering it right now, why their readers should be interested in it right now. Holiday related, right? Here's the Squid Game Netflix effect this Halloween. This was pitched around Halloween. This Journey Further one, this is trending this week. Okay. So you gotta get on it if you want to catch this trend, journalist, right? Like, you make it obvious to them. Here's another one, Rise of 7, Pet Christmas Dinner was up 237 in the last month. Okay. So like, you're again giving them a reason, answering that why now. I like this too, thinking about the readers, right? Thinking about the journalists' readers. If you're targeting the people the right way, this stuff should connect the dots. Again, I mentioned this kind of being very niche. Gamers are hitting the brakes on GPU upgrades as price tags climb and wallets tighten. If you're pitching this to people that are covering gaming GPU upgrades and gaming computers and that sort of thing, they're going to get this. Their readers are probably feeling the price tags climbing and the wallets tightening. So this resonates with their readers. So that's the first part. You want to hook them with some trend. You want to hook them with whatever to get their interest, pique their interest. And the second part is then you're going to give them the headline. What is the main takeaway of your piece? Think about it from the headline that they're going to be writing. And you can see that in all of these examples. The propeller net, 1 in 5 motorists have experienced a caffeine crash while driving. We revealed which parts of the UK are easiest and hardest places to pass your driver's test. The most and least studious states, Maine scored a 100. So those are the most two important pieces of it. And now I'm going to get to kind of the flexible places, okay? The flexible features. And I mentioned a lot of this because from the press release on, this stuff is all going to kind of roll into one another. A lot of the stuff you may want to put in the press release, but some of the people, like I mentioned in the US, do it slightly differently and just like put pieces of this in your pitch. Again, there's no silver bullet here, but the press release, like I said, mainly a UK practice, but I think that is why we're seeing the word count boost up to here. Of the ones I analyzed, it was around 1,000 to like sometimes 1,200 words when you're talking about pasting in a press release, if you have all the components of a traditional press release. And those components are very similar to what I am kind of outlining, where it's like, the headline, right? They have other things like the date. You typically don't need that necessarily if you're pasting it in, but the lead in, right? You're capturing their attention. The key facts, that's going to be something I'm going to get to next. This idea of giving them bulleted information, some type of takeaway or quote, and then the boilerplate is just going to give them background on who you are, and then your contact information. Not always necessary when you're pasting it in. Very rarely did I actually see that, but this is kind of the anatomy of what a press release looks like. But I think the key components are what I'm getting into next, that the key takeaways. So virtually every single email had some type of bolded takeaway. The median was 4 bullets, 4.3. When I used to do it, I would always try to just keep it to 3. I always thought that was too much to give them more, but it really depends on the size of your study and the takeaways. Some people are doing 7 or 8 and they're successful with it. You want to just give the journalists what they need. Here's an example of top 3 in that studious states one. Another one that has 6, right? Again, like not everything can be a key takeaway, but what you're trying to kind of give them are things that are going to stand out and help them write the story, like what the angles and different angles that they might want to write about. Don't be afraid to change up the text. It doesn't have to just be plain text default Arial, Helvetica, whatever. 90% of the ones I analyzed had some sort of decoration. Most people using bold, some people using colored text, or a lot of people using different color text. And a lot of them are also resizing fonts, right? Like a headline that they include in the press release might be larger than other stuff. So it's all about readability and scannability for a lot of people and kind of matching what their expectations are. I saw some people who would actually tailor the color of the text to the colors that you would typically see on the publication of the journalist they were pitching to. So getting it really, really personalized that way. Bolding is probably the easiest and most obvious version of this. And I highly, highly, highly recommend doing it. Key items, key stats, where everybody, again, these journalists are time poor. They're just scanning this stuff. So you just want to highlight the things that are going to be most applicable and most interesting. All right, linking to assets. This happened rarely, I would say. For the most part, it was always in the press release. I've heard a lot of people go in and out, and there wasn't really any like conclusive data on which way to do this. Dropbox links, some people link to Google Sheets, Google Drives. Really, I think it depends on the size of your data set and the size of your story. If you have a lot of assets, say you're pitching them a city index study, and you have a lot of high, res graphics of these states and cities, put them in a Dropbox link, make it easy for the journalist. But it really does depend on how the journalist is going to utilize them, which I'll get to. Okay, expert quote. This is a big one. Before I get into that, I think, again, this was, for the most part, everybody used this. I will get into kind of the expert commentary type of pitch, but I'm going to go through kind of what we should look for in an expert quote when you're doing it based off of the examples and the data that I looked at. So a lot of people did this type of thing where it's like the response to this study, you don't want to, the main mistake is when people just reiterate what the study says. I think the most effective ways of doing this are why the study is important, kind of reinforcing why it's important. So that's what this one from Root does, especially so given that 1.9 million bags mishandled, there's a pandemic, put a pause on traffic. Like what you're doing here, I think, is also providing some more color. You're adding to the story like this one. So cyber attacks are becoming more common and more frequent. AI has lowered the barrier of entry. These are things that are going to help the journalists like frame their article. Maybe I should, add this in here, or if they're kind of looking at the story that you're pitching from different ways. Shaping the narrative. I like this from this Journey Further one I pulled. It was all about, getting sports access for children. And the narrative, I think one of the takeaways here for them was that not everybody has equal access to the sport. So again, you're kind of laying this out, putting your journalist hat on, thinking about how would I want to cover this, and maybe preemptively giving them some color that's going to help tell that story. This was an interesting takeaway. Most of the digital PRs in the UK added the quotes. The US, a lot of them asked if they wanted a quote. It wasn't as stark as the press release one that I shared, but there was definitely a difference. And this one, I think this is kind of a personal preference. I don't think there's any right way to do it. There are some PR professionals who are the mindset of you got to give everybody every single thing that they need to make the right call and to write their article, whereas others will leave the door open to getting responses if they need additional findings or data or quote. I would say the last piece of this is just, I have heard and gotten personally, like when you kind of leave the door open like this for a quote and for coverage, it can kind of help nudge that relationship along, which, depending on the time that you have, that might be worthwhile. The other thing to consider is the journalist you're pitching, do they likely have the bandwidth to even respond like this? Like in super large newsrooms, maybe they won't respond because they're overloaded, and the smaller site and more niche sites, maybe they have more time, so they would respond. It's going to really depend on who you're reaching out to, which again, I'll get to. I think, like we said, it's, some people use them, some people don't. If you do, I think you really want to just do it in a way that is dependent on the person that you're reaching out to, if they're actually going to use it. Data tables, that's another one. Obviously, this is for the data specific stuff, data specific pitches that we're doing and stories, but you can pop them right in there. Data lake content is the most widely used one, so I figured I'd throw it in this, but it doesn't have to be anything flashy. It can look just something like this. Typically, they're found in the kind of press release portion of the pitch, if the people that are doing it, that's where they're found. Okay, this idea of like adding tips and kind of writing an article for the journalist. So this is a very UK-centric thing based off of what I have seen in the data. Only about 20% of the pitches utilize this. And this really, really, to me, depends on the person that you're reaching out to. There are some publications that will write an article and then provide tips at the end. Daily Mail is one, a lot of the UK-centric ones seem to do it this way, though not always. But again, this is very dependent. If you're doing it, think about it. You're just writing an article for them. This was a post about annoying habits for travelers, like the most annoying things that different travelers do. And then as part of the press release, here were some fun ways that drivers can deal with annoying passengers. And they gave them, again, you're literally writing the article for them, making it as easy as possible for this journalist to just plug and play. I said this already, but virtually all the tips are UK based and they came in the press release portion, not in the pitch. Okay. Now I said I would talk about pitching just expert commentary because it's slightly different, although not very by much when you kind of break it down. When I analyzed this, it was kind of just like a condensed version of all the stuff I just talked about. So, the expert commentary, unless you're responding to a journalist request, it's very different. I'm talking about if breaking news happens or you have a brand new client and you want to get them in the news somehow. Typically it's going to be like reactive to a trend, or maybe there's an upcoming trend, there's a holiday, something like that. What you're going to want to do. Sorry guys, can we make sure we all mute? Thank you. You start with the why now. So I wanted to reach out with comments on how to avoid the phenomenon of holiday hoarding. Okay, that's your why now. And then the headline is kind of how to make sure workers are not getting burnt out. So holiday hoarding's happening, it's the holidays, workers are probably getting burnt out. Like that's the takeaway, that's the story. And then the quote just adds to that story. Put your journalist hat on. You got to think about the different angles. What's the narrative? How do you want to shape this? What's going to add something? What's going to add value to the story that you're covering? Here's another one. Again, apple cider, I think I shared this already. Apple cider vinegar for weight loss is up to 177%. Headline, but is the supplement really any good for weight loss? Okay, there's the curiosity, but kind of like that. Maybe that's the headline, and then you could see they really leaned in on it here. And then you get into kind of the tips and the commentary itself. What is apple cider vinegar? And then you have your quotes from people. Okay, I know I caveated a lot of that, and this is why, because I think you come to a webinar like this and you're like, all right, Vince, like I know all this stuff, but like when should I use this and how? And I think the easiest way is always, always, always going to be to read the article of the person that you're pitching to. That will tell you everything you need to know. So you go to the recent articles, their author page typically, and this will guide you into it. It is frustrating, surprising, whatever, that only 56% of us digital PR space are reading recent articles to understand the fit for these pitches. But I think that is really the way to do it. So what you will find how to write your pitch, how to format it, and how to frame the stories by reading just a few of their recent stories. So answering all the questions before, should I add an image? Well, if your target publication and specifically the journalist likes to share images, then put that graphic right in line, right? Do they like to share tips? Like I said, this is like from Daily Mail. You could see like they actually have these little tips and expert commentary after the post itself. Then provide tips. Make it easy as possible. Are they putting in data tables? Give them the data table. Do you see the expert quotes right in there? Chip Lupo from WildHub. Yeah, then you should be giving them expert quotes. You don't have to ask, like they're going to be using them. And then the thing that comes up with all this is like, all right, that takes a ton of time to do that, right? This personalization. And I have to obviously call out ListIQ as like the reason that we built this was so that you can do this more quickly. So if I'm doing a post around flight cancellations because of all the weather, then I can easily do a Google News search. Then I'm going to turn on Google ListIQ, activity check, bio, email address, recent articles. I want to select all these things. And then what I'm going to end up with is a Google Sheet that has all the authors, all of their job titles, their email addresses that are verified, whether or not they're still active at the publication, their bio to make sure that I'm reaching out to people who cover this. But more importantly, I'm going to be able to check out their recent articles. I'm going to see how they're writing things. I'm going to go into their bio, their author page. I'm going to click through, read these articles, and really understand the key components of what it is that they're sharing. That's really what is going to clarify all of this for you really quickly. And I mention this every webinar, but anyone who is here and is interested will get free access to ListIQ, and I will go in and give you a ton of free credits so you can try this stuff yourself. And all you got to do is let me know if you want the credits and just shoot me an email or message me on LinkedIn. I'm just Vince at BuzzStream. Again, I'll follow up with this in an email, but all right. Now I want to get into kind of the fun stuff because there were a lot of great questions that were submitted through the form. And this is also a great time if you have questions yourself, throw it in the chat. How to make a boring subject or topic appealing to journalists. I love this question. I actually did like a whole piece on this. I did a whole presentation, and then I have a YouTube video when I was back at Siege on this. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. But realistically, I mean, there's plenty of people. I mean, think of like in the insurance industry, that is like one of the most boring ones. And like, there are some really killer pieces out there. And it comes down to like being able to access the data for a lot of people. But the thing to think about, I think, in any of this stuff is the why now and the, like the timeless aspect and like why it is appealing to the users, right? So like the actual readers of your journal, your target journalist publication. The other thing to think about is like the emotional side of things. Like if you can figure out something that is really emotional, whether it gets people fired up, they get them excited about something, fears always do well. That kind of stuff really seems to make an impact. So I would say they're my two, but I'll actually share that presentation as well that I did because I go through a whole, workflow for that. The next one is, I think this was Devin. Great question. Do you think reporters prefer a personalized intro that points to recent stories they've done? The data was kind of up in the air with this when I tried to dig into this. And again, like my thought with this is just that it's really dependent on you yourself. And the personalized intro can definitely be misconstrued as fake. Consider these days too, that there are a lot of AI pitch writing software out there that tries to do some of this. I've gotten some of the weirdest quote unquote personalized emails lately, like based off of like my LinkedIn. It was like, it looks like it's cold in Greenwich, Connecticut today, which it was, where I was like, I don't need to know, I don't have the time to like comment on that. I don't think it necessarily does you a big favor doing that sort of thing. So I would say if it is really relevant and can the way I would do it is think of it like this. If your story is adding on to something that exists already, for instance, the press, and let me share my screen because share this article. So we just did a study on the Press Gazette did a thing about blocking AI bots back in June. Here we go. Share my entire window here. So back in June, Press Gazette shared this. Most major news publishers block bots as ChatGPT starts taking live news. This is way back when, 2023. They did another one, I think, last year at some point. But then I just did one recently and pitched it to them, and they recovered it. They covered our piece this time. And because the way that I framed it was, hey, you guys covered this. Like, hey, Charlotte, you covered news publishers blocking ChatGPT. A lot has changed since your last study. So I thought you might be interested in this. Like that is personalizing and matching an article, but it's not like, hey, you covered this. I thought it was great and really interesting that they're blocking bots. So I thought you'd be interested in this city study or something. Like there has to be some real obvious connection. And I think if you're adding to a story that they've done, that to me really makes a big difference. Okay, next one I see, or I'll reshare this again. Next one is this. Okay, how do you build relationships before pitching? I love this as well. Britt Klontz, I think, and Jacqueline Lambert were on our podcast. I could share a link to this. They had some great recommendations for this, but and Britt does it really well that I've seen it. A lot of people do this, but this idea of like sharing content from your favorite journalists and kind of helping them out. Like when they give you a piece of coverage, you go on your personal Twitter and share it and like it, comment on it. Like, again, put yourself in their seat. Like they have jobs to do too, right? Like a journalist has a job. Their job is to get their post out to as many people as possible. So if you can get on there and help them, that makes a big difference, right? Like you're gonna really build your relationship that way. That's all I'll say. I think that goes a big way. What do you focus on when creating outreach campaign to acquire backlinks from your competitors? Okay, so this is like a very strategic thing. And I actually really like this because you can get into the kind of like this helps you do that personalization. So like, take the Press Gazette example I just gave. You have the Press Gazette. If I know my competitors are getting links from them, I'm going to look at the types of things they're covering and I'm going to see what it is that I can either add on to, or I'm going to pitch them similar content. I mean, whatever the competitors are covering or wherever they're getting links from, you can just kind of work backwards from how they're getting their coverage and create similar stuff, create stuff that's better than your competitors and pitch it to the same people. As long as you're not pitching the same exact story, right? Like obviously you don't want to do that. That doesn't make. Okay. Best practices between segments. Amazing question. I got lost in the data with this one. There are some nuances, but there was nothing really that I could extract to say like, yes, every IT person needs images, or, the people in the Ministry of Government only like city index studies. Again, it's really going to depend on who you're pitching to, right? Like, cause there is a wide range of publications in all of these segments and industries, right? There are fashion publications that share images. So yes, you should be pitching them in images. There are fashion ones that are more, straight. They just want city index studies or whatever. So again, the leading indicator for all this stuff is going to be who you're reaching out to, the type and the format of coverage that the publisher and specifically the journalist likes to actually do. All right. Awesome. That was all the questions. Let me see. Cal, the webinar will get emailed over. Lenny had a question. Thank you. General trend for not including press releases in the U.S. mean that when outreaching to U.S., we shouldn't include press releases, as is typically journalist preference. That's a toss up, Lenny. Like, I don't want to, like, a lot of these are agency specific, right? Like you have built your workflow that works. So you're kind of leaning into it. I would test it. I wouldn't want to give you information that says like never use press release. But if you're pitching a ton and you're not getting any responses or links and you're not using press releases, maybe try a press release. I think personally, it seems like less is more, especially in the US market from the people that I've looked at. But there are plenty of agencies that are UK based that do pitching in the US that have a lot of success with this. So yeah, Devin, I think you said it's really 50%. Yeah. I mean, writing a press release, correcting a press release can be tough. It can be time consuming. That's why a lot of people are doing this like AI based version of it. There might be this differentiator nowadays where, there are getting a lot of pushback. Journalists are pushing back on PRs who are doing the like AI generated press releases. And people are saying, I'm immediately discounting these pitches and I just throw them in the trash or hit spam. So like that might be a way to help differentiate yourself is by pitching less and giving them the option to open the door to communication. Like if I was a fake journalist, a fake PR or fake expert, which is a big concern in the space, maybe I wouldn't be so forthcoming and say like, hey, you can, email me and I'll set up a time to call if you have any questions about this study. That to me shows that you're a real person. So maybe there is some competitive advantage that way. But yeah. Any other questions in the chat? Anybody have questions about any of this stuff? All right. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks again, everybody. This has been great. And yeah, email me any questions you have, Vince at BuzzStream, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone.